Hello, welcome to another installment of Circle Sanctuary's Green Faith Circle. I'm so glad that you are tuning in, and I'm your facilitator, Rev Sharp Bear, and we have other fine folks around the screen here. I want to invite you, Nicholas, introduce yourself.
Introduce myself.
Mhm.
I'm Nicholas. I live in West Kentucky. I'm retired, so I have time to follow things in the news. A lot of people I know don't. Um, and climate is a big one for me, human rights, and these conflicts in the world that are currently, monkey wrenching.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah,
uh,
thanks for being in the studio audience with us on this meeting. And Selena?
Hi, I'm Selena Fox, and I live in an oak forest in southwestern Wisconsin on land next to Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve. And I've been involved with environmental activism since my youth.
Thank you. And Reverend Selena is also our senior priestess at Circle Sanctuary, which is the country's oldest and most established nature based religion network. It's a national network as well as a regional center. And I'm going to punt to you, Dennis.
Hi, I'm Dennis Carpenter, and I also live in that oak forest next to Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve in southwestern Wisconsin. And the environment's been a concern of mine for a long time, and that's why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. And Dennis is our senior priest here at Circle Sanctuary as well. So, I'm a climate reality leader. I work as a healthcare chaplain. I'm a veteran and I'm a minister with Circle Sanctuary. And our Green Faith Circle is just, we like to do a deeper dive discussion into some of these things that I know are on your mind, they're on our mind, and we're just trying to keep the conversation going and invite you to think about these things and to share this with others if you find the conversation helpful. So tonight we're kind of doing an end of 2023 wrap up as we think about COP 28. Maybe you've seen that in the news. Maybe you know all about it. COP 28. So we're going to kind of walk you through what we're thinking about here. First of all, folks, help everyone understand what is COP. Anyone want to answer that? Nicholas, what's COP?
I could say a few words. I'm new to COP, but this is number 28 is what happened this year. So that's somehow, some way, some shape, 28 years of these conferences. It's sponsored by the United Nations. Though when they just say COP, which is Conference of the parties to the problem, parties to the solution. Parties who are focusing on and theoretically going to solve climate crisis. I suppose corporations can be parties to the matter, and nations can be parties to the matter, and individuals and non-governmental organizations and so on. So maybe it's just a clever phraseology, to bring everybody into the question: what are we going to do to save planet Earth?
Thank you.
COP itself actually has its roots in the aftermath of the 1990 Earth Day. In 1992, countries joined in an international treaty, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And by 1995, countries launched negotiations to strengthen global response to climate change. I invite you to go to the UN website and look at the history of the convention for more information. Why is 1990 Earth Day important? I was one of the many people that worked with Senator Gaylord Nelson to birth Earth Day back in 1970, April 22nd. And in 1970, people from across the United States, there's primarily a national gathering at that time, But by the time 1990 came around, it turned global. And this was before the World Wide Web of the internet was such an important part for communication. And I think it's really important that we continue to find ways of people from different countries, different cultures, different religions, different languages, different walks of life to come together and to think globally. One of the early statements as Earth Day came to be, think globally, act locally. Well, we need both. And so my positive regard for COP, the Conference of Parties, has been, it is an endeavor to get peoples of the world's countries together to talk about the climate and try to find ways to collaborate and communicate and motivate and get momentum to address environmental problems.
Thanks for some of that historical perspective, Selena. Dennis, did you want to add anything?
Well, I'll only make an editorial comment here at this point in time. Here we are, 28 COPs. And where are we really? You know, if we'd have dealt with this back in the 90s or earlier, it would be a whole different situation than we find ourselves in now. And quite frankly, after piecing together the bits I was able to get through the ways I had available this week, I'm not real optimistic in terms of what COP has accomplished, not only this year, but collectively over the last 28 years. We don't have another 28 years to play around with this issue and talk about it.
Well, you know what? If it's okay with the group, I'm going to jump right off that diving board right there, because you are getting to the heart of the issue this year and why this is such a big deal in the news. Because, I mean, another COP, 28 COPs, great. Everyone was excited about the Paris Agreement back in 2015 when the international cooperation seemed to hit a turning point where everyone was saying, oh my gosh, we're going to work together to lower global emissions. Everybody has a consensus agreement on human caused climate change and global warming. We're going to keep the planet at 1.5 Celsius degrees, or I think that's right, or lower. We're going to keep it sustainable. We all are in this together. We're responsible. What this COP just did is effectively undermine, if not try to throw out, any of the advanced progress made in the last 9 years. And the United Nations really launched the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which some of you may have heard of as the IPCC report. It's been all over. And that had 6 rounds of studies done by climate scientists all over the world, premier climate scientists. And they've all agreed we've got about a decade here to really be proactive in mitigating suffering and turning things around. And we have the capacity to do that. We're capable of doing it. Do we have the political will to do that? And if you'll indulge me, why 10 years and why does this matter is because what they're telling us, and this just was renewed again this week, December 6th, it came out of a new report led by the University of Exeter's Global Systems Institute in collaboration with more than 200 researchers worldwide. They agree Earth's climate has already warmed enough that humans are at risk of triggering 5 global tipping points that could have a disastrous effect on the planet if the world is warming more than the 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The likelihood of these tipping points increases. And one of these tipping points basically are the melting of ice sheets in West Antarctica and Greenland, the rapid thawing of large swaths of Arctic permafrost, the slowing of the North Atlantic subpolar gyre, and tropical coral reef die-off. These tipping points in the Earth system could in turn trigger damaging tipping points in societies, things like food security, crises, mass displacement, climate refugees, wars, conflicts. So stopping these threats is possible, but it's going to require urgent global action that requires urgent international cooperation. And so that was the hope going into COP28. But the glaring conflict of interest was there. The presider and host, oil CEO in a largely fossil fuel driven country. That was already concerning. Less than 300 indigenous or frontline activists were represented. Over 3,000 fossil fuel lobbyists attended. It's been taken over by fossil fuel lobbyists, basically. So this was the big upset, although it could be expected, about COP this year. So folks, what are some of the things you've been learning that's been coming down, that's been talked about at COP, and where are we at right now as it's heading into overtime?
Well, I'm glad that some media is covering COP28. As someone who lives rurally and has to rely on regular television and satellite, and limited internet, I have had to make it a priority to get reports. The BBC has carried reports pretty consistently in their regular newscasts, the BBC America that I have on satellite television. And I've been able to get information from the press, but for something as important as our climate and what's happening with destruction in so many places due to climate events, there really hasn't been the media attention that there needs to be, not only in the United States, but some other countries. I chose to get very active in looking for a way to learn about what's happening at COP. And it turns out that the University of Wisconsin had a special program on December 4th called Live from Dubai, Wisconsin Goes to COP28. So I'm very thankful that that was available for free and I was able to find out about it. And I'm thankful that public health became part of the conversation for the first time in 28 COPs. There's actually a day given to looking at the public health dimensions of environmental crisis. So I'm hoping that the conversation regarding environmental issues will continue regardless of what the final draft agreement is put together, as COP now is in overtime. It was supposed to be done this afternoon, Tuesday, December 12th. In Dubai time, but they're working into the night to try to move things forward and to address the great outcry of people going, why have you taken out mention of fossil fuel mitigation? Elimination is part of this conference agreement.
Right. So I'll waffle on that while Nicholas and Dennis think about what they want to add. But that for anyone who's listening and may not be aware, the number one cause of the excessive amount of human caused global warming is from the burning of fossil fuels. So to be clear, that's coal, oil, and gas. Natural gas is not clean energy. Clean energy, as we talk about, is wind, solar, hydro. There was a lot of gaslighting going on at COP with high-level discussions about, there's no irrefutable proof that we must, phase out fossil fuels. And I was just aghast, thinking, are you kidding me? We just had 6 IPCC reports. I mean, gaslighting. making everybody doubt the science again. I mean, that was really evil as far as I'm concerned. That's evil. And then the other greenwashing was all of this emphasis on, oh, we can bring up clean technologies. Oh, sure, nuclear is on the rise. Oh, carbon capture. Nuclear has so far to go to transition from very dangerous kinds of military sources of nuclear power to civilian uses of nuclear power and to be generating enough capacity anytime soon. It's expensive. It's not coming online fast enough, way more than the 10 years we're looking at. And the carbon capture also, little trickles of carbon capture going in, nothing big enough, nothing fast enough. But the greenwashing is our company can keep pumping out all this fossil fuel and expand gas and oil and coal projects because, hey, over here, we're doing carbon capture projects. Gaslighting, greenwashing, big time. Anybody else?
Yeah, let me toss out a few of the things that I have here. And it's kind of like, where am I with COP? Where am I with climate change? And I'll anchor it by mentioning the 5 tipping points, okay, which you listed. And over the years, I've been following that. Got to worry about the coral and the methane and the ice and the glaciers and stuff like that. And also in the last few years, we've been seeing, wildfires and torrential rains and, billion-dollar weather events, destruction here and there. And so, like
Plagues.
we see it happening. We see it happening. Okay. And so, we got COP for 28 years and Nick hasn't paid attention for 28 years. He knows Paris Agreement and a few other things and, hopeful. Oh, they're agreeing on something. And then, of course, we got Mr. Who's his name, who said, "Oh, let's back out of that," from the USA, backing out. Anyway, so I saw that, and so this year it was like, okay, so who are these parties, and what are they talking about, and how are they working on it? And I knew that the 27th didn't go very well either. People were not very happy with the outcome of that, and I am aware of the reports that the UN, IPCC, are putting out. And 80,000 people and 200 nations and all these oil companies and NGOs, there's a lot to follow. So I peeked in on the Wisconsin people, okay, I know Wisconsin people. I can up their numbers, help them validate their grant or whatever it is. But I have names, like Kerry. He's supposed to be doing something with climate change. We have the American Department of State, and we have Gore. I'm in Twitter, and I follow people with channels, and they're following COP, so I'm getting little reports from them, and just looking to see how people are talking about it. And I saw the same thing. Saudi Arabia, saying we have no plans of cutting back, let alone stopping the use of fossil fuels, which is basically saying we like our money, and we, like buying real estate around the world, and we can own it all if we just keep selling our oil. And then the thing with the president of COP28 saying, there's no science behind reducing fossil fuels and all that kind of stuff. But also, I notice from the UN and the EU and Kerry, is all this jargon coming in, and it's soft ways to say we're going to transition, and maybe we can still use fossil fuels. And Kerry has the word abate. Well, if we're going to use fossil fuels, we want to use abated fossil fuels. And since coal is not abated, so we don't want to use coal, so we'll phase coal out. But some of the others are abated. And anyway, I'm listening to all this jargon that I can only give a few samples here.
Greenwashing, yeah.
And I call it greensplaining.
Greensplaining, I love it.
Um, uh, and the nuclear, it's like, what do they think? We don't
Mhm,
know what these things are. It's like, doesn't
mhm,
it take like 10, 12, 15 years to put in a
mhm,
nuclear power plant? We don't
mhm,
got 10, 12, 15 years to put in a nuclear power plant. Especially when I have one guy who's just doing all the good news. This
mhm.
is what they're doing over here to put in solar. This is what they're doing over there. And this country ran all on renewables, for a day, and, all those kinds of cool things. And,
And they are happening. It is
they're
cool. They are
happening,
happening.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I don't know the exact numbers, so I'm kind of exaggerating. We put in 100,000 solar panels in one day. Now, of course, they had to order them. They all had to be delivered. That took some time, but the installation is very quick. It didn't take 10 years. But anyway, so I'm just converging with how people are talking about it. And, there's like, everyone's afraid that if we stop something, the economy is going to collapse. And I think that's a valid thing. We don't want the economy to collapse while we, get on a different track. Um, uh,
Can I,
but they
I'm
don't,
gonna,
but they don't say that.
mhm,
They've got
mhm,
this jargon and this couchy way of saying we're gonna whatever we're gonna do.
mhm,
Who's like, one of the things is who's the second biggest exporter of oil? Russia.
mhm,
Okay, and they're still doing it. And
mhm.
meanwhile, they're blowing up Ukraine so that it gets more oil wells in the Black Sea. It's like, but anyway, so all these things are converging, and I'm looking for, um, and then there's a set of people who are saying that's bullshit, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. And I haven't heard anyone say what Kerry is saying is bullshit, but I think it's double talk.
Mhm,
I like
mhm.
watching Gore get upset,
And he's been real
and he
upset. He's one of
has,
my
and he
men.
has,
He's like, this
and
is
so
degraded.
I'm
This is.
and so
Mhm,
I'm looking for who the doers are, who are actually making these solar things happen, because one day no one's going to be buying the oil.
mhm.
They're going to be saying thank you very much, but we're set anyway. So I'm and what I'm doing right now is kind of this emotional roller coastery kind of thing, because that's what the experience is as we watch. We see some people doing some really good stuff and some really good science, and then we see double talk, and then we see, oil companies or countries saying, hey, this is our business model, sell oil, and we don't plan on giving it up. So
Right.
anyway,
We're,
that's my little bit of a rant.
I love that, Nicholas. Thank you. I appreciate the emotional roller coaster because I'm feeling like I'm in the movie Don't Look Up right now. I'm feeling like we're there. Dennis, were you getting ready to say something?
Yeah, I've watched this in the ways that I can, and it does seem like there was some progress made with regard to getting more voluntary commitments of money by different governments to help frontline people who live in areas that are most directly impacted early on here in the kind of changes that are happening with climate change. There was apparently some progress made with regard to, as Selena mentioned, getting public health issues on the table for discussion. I'm aware that there was supposedly some progress made with regard to discussing food and how food is made in the world, and food waste, and trying to make some progress in making food production and distribution more efficient. Some discussion and supposed progress in controlling methane release, that sort of thing. But these are voluntary things that to me are getting at the the results of climate change rather than nailing the direct cause of climate change, which is fossil fuels. So that is indeed the frustrating part about where we find ourselves now, is that not everybody's there with regard to being willing to see fossil fuels as the problem and take significant and drastic steps to curtail their use. So that's the
Well,
problem.
certainly not everybody in a conference that has been overtaken and hosted by fossil fuel companies. That's for sure. For me, it's like, we've got a United Nations. You need to find a different venue. You need to find a different venue now. And Azerbaijan for COP29, which is a fossil fuel dependent country, is not where it should be happening. It's like, it just lost all credibility as a venue. And I know the United Nations continues to be passionate about this, the organizers, but they need to remove fossil fuel interests from the discussion. And because they're not going to phase themselves out. They're not going to phase themselves out. They'll work on elevating all these little extra things on the fringes, but that's not the elephant in the room. Yeah. So I wonder, you mentioned some really cool things that were discussed there. And I do want to lift up the Blue Marble podcast that was recorded this month with special guest Jess Leclerc, PhD, who talks about specifically nursing for the planet and nursing and the voice of nurses. And she mentions the public health component at COP28 this year, which was pretty cool and different. Selena, other things other than some things Dennis mentioned that you were aware of that were good, that did come up at COP?
I think the discussion around farming methods and agribusiness, the methane discussions that were highlighted are some positive developments. I do think that COP will have a place going forward, regardless of the fossil fuel element, but I don't think that COP is sufficient. It's one piece of trying to bring humankind together with all of its diversity and different viewpoints about things, but we really do need to be aware of the intersectionality that make up climate issues, the migration issues that are happening as people are being displaced by climate events. And I guess I'll say right now, I am hoping that what is being predicted about the new draft of the agreement being released about now in time for the 9:30 a.m. Plenary, that's Dubai time. They're already into Wednesday now as we're recording. I'm really hoping that not only there can be some good agreements and moving things forward so that the addiction to fossil fuel that too many human societies and individuals have, we need to break that. And I think COP really does have to address that and take a look at its own addiction to the money of corporations that deal in fossil fuels. And certainly I've been not only paying attention to actual reporters who are at COP28 and journalists covering COP28, but also people in the streets and protesting in other ways, online and actual physical demonstrations, basically raising their voices and being part of this process. So for me, going back to the very first part of our discussion, COP What is this conference of parties? Well, it's not only the official people who are at the conference as participants in the conference, but the world itself is taking a look at this in a variety of ways. And I'm hoping this will motivate people to get busier to address the climate change issues and to really take a look at this fossil fuel addiction and to find a way to not only break the addiction, but to recover in good ways.
Shar?
Yeah.
To answer to the question which you put to Selena, and in a little bit adding to what Dennis said, I think that attempting to bring in more indigenous peoples is there. That's good. And the work to bring in younger generations is there too. I need to follow up on that more. One of the jargon things that I saw at COP was they seem to have created a word called actionist. So instead of activist, you're an actionist. And in some ways I like that, but I think all the activists and actionists are at the table. And tacking onto what my flow from earlier, Buttigieg is now doing a lot of announcements about trains and rail and public railroad projects in the United States. And I think that is the kind of thing that's happening around the world. You just do a project, and all of a sudden you have a bunch more public transit than you had before. I wish I had done it in 1990s, so I'm at my age to be traveling around the country on the rail, but if the next generations have better public transit, that's really a good thing. And so I've set one of my tasks is to look at who's just doing it. And I think that Buttigieg's making these announcements during COP. I don't think he's saying, and this is, relates to climate. He's is saying this relates to being smart in the transit or transportation sphere. So I'm looking for those things, and I'm looking for like I said, next generation people, not just marching in the street, but part of the work to create solutions. So, check.
I want to piggyback on that and say, I'm a member of the Climate Reality Project. That is the project that former Vice President and Nobel laureate Al Gore started after he left public office. I am a trained climate reality leader. You can be too. And they're going to have a lot more domestic trainings here in the US next year. Online, in person, and they're incredible. But it trains you to be an actionist, I guess, is the word, a climate actionist, and help lead communities in doing that, if that's interesting to you. But if you just want to find out about them, go to climaterealityproject.org/training. But it's also helpful. They have on the climaterealityproject.org webpage, they have a whole section on the key issues at COP28, where they've been able to distill it out. And there's a part called Join Us for 24 Hours of Reality on the ground at COP28. So that's another resource if you're looking for overviews that help you sort of see the bigger picture. And as you say, Nicholas, who's doing what to try to move the needle in the right direction. Another thing that's really groovy that was presented at COP this year, I think not in a plenary, but it's this new technology called Climate Trace. You can see this yourself at climatetrace.org. That's one word, Climate Trace, TRACE.org. And what this is using geospatial technology, it allows us to see what greenhouse gases are being emitted, by whom, where, how much, and to what degree. It is the first time we have real-time evidence of who is emitting how much greenhouse gases. And it's pretty amazing because it holds polluters accountable. And it unveiled its open emissions database of more than 352 million assets this year at COP. So that's another resource you can look at. And I think that's going to be a game changer going forward, because someone can stand up and say, oh, there's no need to. And you can look right on that puppy and see not only where the money is, but how much they're polluting.
There's another I know it's a catchphrase, but it was new to me when COP started. This idea of stock take.
That's
Um,
another one.
right, and all the countries and all the parties are taking stock, inventorying where they are at, and I guess they have to put together reports. Maybe they've done it. I don't know. That's yet another thread that I want to follow to see who the real movers and shakers are in the change. Change is needed. So
Yeah, that's another really good tool. It's like a report card on who is actually making what progress to what extent on their commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So there are some accountability tools coming along, which may change the conversation going forward, may change the venue for where this happens. But we all have to remember we got about a decade here. So, taking a deep breath, and we're breathing. Anything else you want to add about COP? If not, I'll ask, what are you hoping for? What are you hoping for going forward here? What's on your heart and mind and hope?
I'm going to click into what Selena has been reading as we go along. I really hope that strong parties in this report or agreement, whatever it is that they're coming out of COP28, with really get the language back into whatever the final statement that comes from COP28. I want to know who the strong ones are that get language put back in. So that's my next tomorrow. I guess look tomorrow.
To the New York Times, about 70,000 people arrived in the United Arab Emirates for the COP28. That's a lot of people. So what I think is that there were some positive takeaways, that those 70,000 people not only will tell people they immediately know, but get the word out about what they've heard that has highlighted the need to take action more quickly. One of the big problems with COP over the years has been there's been a lot of discussion, but not so much action. Perhaps that's where actionist comes from. We definitely need to continue to have communication and negotiation and collaboration, but we need change, action now. I do think we need to have more people from more places experiencing climate in more ways to be part of the conversation. So rather than putting our hopes on COP29, I really think we can take some lessons from COP28. Not only some positive things that have come by being highlighted, but the urgency to really get busy and to not just rely on COP28 discussions there to move us forward. So I am truly hoping that this is going to encourage more people to get more active and to have conversations. And I see us having this conversation as an example of what can happen as a result of COP28. So I invite those of you who have tuned in and watching this to share this and to put your own comments about COP with people that you know. There's an article that came out earlier today. It was released actually at 3 a.m. Eastern time in the New York Times, and you might find it helpful to track that article down on the internet. The headline is COP28 comes at a moment of both hope and peril. Well, we need to be aware of the peril, but we also need to recognize there is hope, there is some time, but we need to increase our actions, not only to talk about things, but to get some changes done. And that takes us into the political arena. And 2024 in the USA is a major election year. I invite those of you listening and watching this conversation to not only pay attention to what you hear about candidates at local, state, and national elections, but to ask the questions. What are the positions regarding climate change and climate action? So it's my hope that COP28 will inspire more people to get more active, because humankind has to work together to solve the problem that we have created. We need to get out of the terrible twos and get our toilet training together, clean up our messes, and start working in better harmony with the creatures and the plants and the ecosystems, with the whole biosphere, for a healthier planet. I think that's still possible, and I'm going to continue to keep my eye on that prize and continue to take some action.
Thank you, Selena. Yeah, I know what they say. You don't like war. You don't like war. Change the politicians who make war. You don't like climate change and climate impacts. Change politicians to get the climate politicians you need. Exactly. Election. Dennis, what do you hope for?
Well, ultimately, I hope that somehow we get together and reduce our dependency on fossil fuels and limit the damage that's done to our planet and our way of life. I think another hope of mine is that somehow we figure out a way to get population talked about a little bit more these days. It seems like nobody wants to talk about population control anymore, but quite frankly, how do we continue to rapidly grow the human population on this finite planet and make it all work? So those are my hopes.
Thank you. And that, just a side note, that was a point brought up in the Jess Leclerc's Blue Marble about an invasive species. Speaking of public health, a very real phenomenon when you think of the Earth as a living organism. My hope is that we stop having a war on truth. We stop just splatting attitude and misinformation at each other across social media platforms, but that we re-engage civil conversation like we're trying to do now, where we can agree to disagree, or we don't know, or we have all kinds of mixed ambivalent feelings, or we're struggling together, because it's in that creative struggle that we start to break through to something better than where we're at right now. If we're going to maintain a representative democracy at all, which is also my hope, that we manage to maintain a representative democracy, and we are in perilous times about that, is that I hope everybody votes and votes for the right side of history, because without that, without a representative democracy, without the ability to have decent adult conversations about these things, we can't move anything forward whatsoever. And I don't want Mordor. I don't want to live in Mordor. So that's my hope, is that we avoid Mordor. I don't want to battle orcs. I don't want to do that. So, as we close, folks, what is your favorite word? They talked about Webster's favorite word of the year. I'm just going to say, I think my favorite word is green-splaining. Nicholas C., that's my favorite word. What's your favorite word?
Oh boy.
Wait for it. Actionist is a good one too.
Yeah, that's good. At this late
I
hour,
like-
I'm drawing blanks.
You'll go with actionist. All right. Selena, you got a favorite word that's different?
Things with the word green in it that are positive. So I like the word greening, a true greening, as a way of envisioning what are possibilities for us. And we need to green life, and we need to green death, with green cemeteries. And we really need to go beyond our understanding of the importance of human survival to recognizing we are in relationship with plants and creatures and ecosystems and the whole biosphere and the universe. So I really hope that we can move into a sustainable greening world.
For me, I've taken up the phrase next generations. And so when I'm writing online in different social media contexts to different topics, I'm deliberately using next generations. Sometimes I say young people in similar terminology, but that's what this is about, is the next generations that are coming, and we're doing it for them. So that's my phrase.
Well, with all those good words in mind, thank you so much to each one of you for participating in this conversation. We have many people who opt into our Green Faith Ministry at Circle Sanctuary. You can go to the Circle Sanctuary webpage and find out how to do that. You can also find an archive of Blue Marble podcasts and these YouTube recordings to keep the conversation going. And our commitment, aside from conversation, is to bring you vetted, accurate information, and to try to have intelligent conversation about these things that empower you and motivate you. So if you value what you are seeing here today, please share it with others, and tune in again. I'm your host, Rev Charbert. Thank you to everyone here. And until next time, hope to see you in the green space.